controversial statement is that you should hire a security person before you hire your first developer. Think about it, security was always an unsexy thing, and people hate building boring things here. You can build a new Oracle, you can launch a new chain. Yeah, we build all these pieces of infrastructure, and who's gonna be using it? I'm personally extremely passionate about boring use cases. As you see, payment for me is the most boring but the most compelling use case. We need to start building these boring middlewares and present it to the end user without mentioning blockchain. Unfortunately for us.
I guess as soon as you use the word infrastructure, that's what people think, right? But actually, I do think what you guys do is very sexy and very cool, particularly in this space. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Token Talks, brought to you as ever from our sunny studio here in Singapore, where the aircon is always set to high. Eugene, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today. So my background is largely in engineering research and cybersecurity. So I started my career in a cybersecurity company where I spent quite a lot of years. And then I worked in a couple of smaller startups also related to cybersecurity in different countries. I moved to Beijing at some point. I lived there for a couple of years. So I have a piece in my heart for Asia. So that's why I'm based in Singapore for the last 7 years as well. I lived in Israel for a year, where I explored a lot of like cybersecurity landscape and like the startup scene, which is amazing in Tel Aviv, an amazing city as well. And then basically I moved to Singapore to build the R&D for a company called Acronis, which is also a data protection cybersecurity company, where I basically bootstrapped the team from 0 to 30. And during the time, basically we built a product around blockchain on Ethereum. And that's where I was like super interested in the blockchain tech. It was, I think, year 2016. So quite early, even though I was touching Bitcoin before in the cybersecurity space, because we were exploring products around, securing Bitcoin wallets and all this kind of stuff. But what really sparked my interest is Ethereum in 2016, where we built a product on top of Ethereum, and it was a mess to build because there was no tools. It was ridiculously unstable. So we basically said, okay, somebody should fix this. And basically we started working on a product called Chainstack, which is basically a reliable, affordable, and fast API suite for all sorts of blockchain applications and developers. And since then, basically we are full-time building it at full steam.
Amazing. And since then you've moved to Singapore, build out a team here. Where is the Chainstack team? Where are you guys based? So
currently we're based in around 35 countries. So we originally started from Singapore. We were a very small and nimble team, around 10 people in like 2016, 17. And then basically we started to grow a little bit and the market started picking up in like 2020, 2021. And we started growing pretty dramatically. But that time there was COVID already. So there was sort of no point in hiring people just in Singapore because the talent was everywhere and everybody was like migrating from one country to another. So we decided, okay, we will build a remote team. And since then we are completely remote, which is very good for our business because our business's core pillar is reliability. So we need to offer coverage for our customers 24/7 across the globe, nonstop. So we basically leverage this big time because we have people in Latin America, Europe, Asia, so multiple locations, and people can work during the days, which is amazing because there are some companies, and I was like that in my early days. I basically worked night shifts. It was horrible because you basically cannot, properly sleep. It was very nice because I was doing, my university studies at the same time. So it was nice because you could combine, but your health is gonna get cut like big time if you do this. So I decided deliberately. So if you do a 24/7 shift setup, we should do it in a way that basically is not disruptive for health of people. So that's why our like distributed nature that we built it during the COVID times helped us a lot because we didn't have, to fill roles with like people working like, after midnight and all this kind of stuff. So we're very distributed right now.
Yeah, sounds great. And I love the fact that your business now came out of a real life problem that you had, right? You saw that the infrastructure in Web2 as we were progressing into Web3 just wasn't there. How's that evolved? So like coming from originally a Web2 background and now seeing the challenges you are helping people solve in Web3, how's that evolution progressed?
So I would say that it's actually not so bad now. I think that tooling wise, there's been a lot of tools built for this like last 6 years. So it's been evolved pretty dramatically. Now it's not very hard to find, reliable APIs, sources of data, you name it. But there's still a lot to build. Like for instance, if you think about like Web2 development, there's so many verticals. Like starting with observability to monitoring to logging to simulations to like QA to deployment to like integrations and so on and so forth. So there's so many different areas, and if you like Google for something like ecosystem map for like Web2 dev tools, you will find like probably thousands or tens of thousands of companies solving these problems in Web2 today, and many of them are very popular, and like widely used, such as let's say AWS with all the suite of tools that they have, and some of them are very niche and like they just solve a particular problem in Web2 development space. But there is like tens of thousands of companies that are basically solving different problems in the development. So I believe we're still quite early. I think that if you're bootstrapping a business in Web3, you already can find a suite of tools for yourself to be relatively comfortable and like having all your bases covered, but there's still a lot of pieces that are missing, and I'm sure will be built within the next 10 years for sure.
Yeah, great. So let's take that as an example. If I'm a builder looking to get started in Web3 or build my first project, what are the special considerations that I need to have in mind for Web3 versus building a Web2 project?
Oh, that's a great topic. So basically, it's the same sort of thing in general, right? You build code, right? So from very high level perspective, you basically need people who build code. You need the same kind of people like product managers and like product designers and like marketeers and so on. So it's a product, right? In the end, but the way the code is being built and the approach and like the way you basically apply certain perspectives on like how you're building a code is dramatically different, right? So basically what you have in Web2 development, you have some piece of code which is usually running on like some centralized servers which you have access to, and then you basically can choose like where to deploy, when to deploy, and like when to open source, either open source at all or not, or maybe like never open source. Right, so you basically have quite a lot of control over the product, over your code that you're shipping to the public. So you can be relatively, when I say relatively, it depends on your risk appetite. You can be relatively relaxed with regards to what you ship, how you ship, when you ship, especially if you start building an MVP. And usually MVPs are very quick and dirty, and they are hosted by a couple of guys on some very easy to use like a platform as a service kind of tool like Vercel or like Netlify or something like that. And then basically all the rest is depending on like how you get traction, whether you get traction, and then you're gonna invest more into like building better products, having more observability, reliability, etc., etc. With Web3, it's a bit different because it's very hard, especially in DeFi space. Whenever you basically touch the money, because first time you start touching the money, you're gonna extend your basically landscape and like your security posture quite a bit. And hence, you cannot really focus on, just shipping the MVP with whatever quality possible. And then suddenly it skyrockets and then you're very popular, because basically if you apply some unreasonable practices when you are very early, and then your app is suddenly popular, you basically have an app that is by design public, because that's how we build it in the public blockchain space. Basically, all the code is public, and there are so many people who are hunting for basically all sorts of vulnerabilities in this code and around this code as well, which is like front ends and deployment pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. So you become much easier victim rather than you deploy, applications and you build products in Web2 space, which is much more controlled because you control where you give out, certain visibility to your process, to your code, etc. So I would say that even though code here, code there, but very different from, like design thinking, okay, how do I build my app? How do I secure my app? How do I deploy my app? And like, because the security posture from day one after you deploy is dramatically different and is probably like few years behind if you were building like a Web2 app and you deploy it like on day zero.
Yeah, it makes sense. You mentioned AWS, and I don't want to make the comparison, but for Chainstack, are is the vision to become a similar type of company for Web3 services? So the types of, I guess, services you're providing would be things like hosting, whatever else it might be. Is that the vision for Chainstack? Or
Yeah. So originally, Chainstack started as a control panel for blockchains. That's basically was our tagline in 2018 when we launched the first version of the product. We were originally focused on like institutional blockchains, like enterprise blockchains, built on protocols like Hyperledger Fabric, Corda. Some of the people still remember these protocols because they're not as popular and not as hyped today as they were like a few years ago. So we basically were focused on this part of the market, which at that point of time was extremely, popular. Everybody was thinking about it, and everybody was at least like promoting the projects that they were building on it, and like all the interbank transfers and like supply chain finance, all this kind of use cases were very popular. So they never realized themselves. So we switched to more of a public chain side of blockchains, and that's the part that got really successful over the last few years. But originally, like our vision on Chainstack was a multi-chain, multi-cloud platform, right? So it's still in the place up to date. So we basically have now supported like more than 25 different public chains. We still, by the way, support private chain deployment. So we have a bunch of customers running on this private enterprise chains as well, but the majority of the business is on the public chains. And the original vision of Chainstack was basically to provide this like complete suite of services so that people can build on a multitude of blockchains that we were sure in 2018 will be there. So there was actually no notation of like multi-chain back then. So multi-chain appeared probably around, when first side chains and L2s appeared, which was probably like in 2020, 2021. So nobody really talked about the fact that, okay, we will have actually like, a lot of chains, which will be used for different purposes, which will have different advantages, disadvantages. So at that point of time, for me, it was already super clear that we will have multiple chains, and probably this enterprise blockchain narrative helped a lot because basically they are all, silo chains that people deploy and they work together on. But there will be never like one chain such as Ethereum and everybody will work on Ethereum. So this shaping of our product helped a lot because we were basically very agnostic towards what kind of chains we support, what kind of hosting options we support. So we were building with this like platformization in mind so that we will plug in necessary, features when time comes, when there's demand. And we had pretty broad vision from day one on like how Chainstack would look like. I would say that in terms of like AWS comparison, we're trying to be sort of underdogs of the Web3 cloud. Our original inspiration came from, I think, companies like DigitalOcean, which are like small in size, much friendlier towards developers, and like, much easier to use, much more affordable, much more transparent in terms of like pricing and feature set. So we were probably looking at becoming, sort of DigitalOcean of Web3 infrastructure rather than AWS of Web3 infrastructure, because we didn't really wanted to become a like gigantic company that will serve 60% of the market because with this comes a lot of responsibility and you cannot move as fast as you want. So we deliberately decided, okay, we're gonna be very fast, very agile. We're gonna implement and ship features pretty quickly. So that's our vision. We wanted to be a progressive kind of Web3 infrastructure. Web3 cloud provider in the early days, and it's still the case as of today.
Got it. And then past couple of years, well, year and a half, we've been in a kind of bear cycle. You more than anybody have been interacting with, I guess, the builders of Web3. What are you observing in terms of what people are building at the moment, the way that you're interacting with your customers? Is there anything that's changed during the bear market? And what's your outlook, I guess, for the next year or so?
Right. It's a very hot topic, I guess. So I will not spread much predictions here because I'm very bad in predicting stuff. But of course, we have a lot of touch points with builders. For us, the outlook is pretty simple. We see builders building still. So the growth is of course not as dramatic as it was in the bull market in like 2021, beginning of 2022. The customer base is still there. So we're not losing money. We're not losing customers, which is great news. And I think it's quite unique in this space because there are many businesses, running out of money, closing down. So I think that our choice of, business model where we basically service core needs and where we basically cover the, super base, necessary, services for people who are building anything on the blockchain, such as like RPC nodes, indexers, subgraphs. This is kind of baseline thing that you would use when you build anything on the blockchain. So I think this choice was pretty good, and it's pretty robust from this perspective, because we still have a lot of customers that survived the market. Our offering is very compelling to them because it's very fair. And we actually see a lot of people switching to Chainstack from competition because their pricing was great for the bull market when people just spend cash on whatever, and they just use 5 providers at the same time, didn't really look into the bills. And our offering now, which we basically explain very clearly how we differentiate in terms of price, that we are very reliable and we provide extremely good performance. It plays very well in the bear market because people understand value prop now much more, because they now take care about how much they cost, which was not really the case on the bull market. So which plays in a very positive fashion for us. In terms of the what we will see in 1 year time, I mean, there are a lot of perspective directions this space is exploring, I would say. I don't think there's a definite growth driver at the moment. We don't see it. There are some signals, a bit of social, Friendstack, Farcaster, Lens, a bit of here and there, not really mainstream. There are a lot of interesting movement in the payment space. I'm personally extremely passionate about boring use cases. As you see, Chainstack is extremely boring company. We don't do exciting, DeFi, new kind of, strategies or new kind of tokenomics, etc. So we have very boring business, which is also a plus for us because it's very stable from this perspective. And basically, I love other boring use cases in crypto. And payment for me is the most boring but the most compelling use case, because I deal with it every day. We have a bit of payroll on crypto. We are the first Web3 infrastructure company that started accepting crypto for payments. So I'm having fun of it with the team every week, because people tend to pay with Dogecoin for Web3 APIs and other interesting currencies, which I would never expect them to pay for. But if you open this avenue, people are paying with whatever tokens they have. So I'm very passionate about boring use cases, and I've seen a lot of traction by talking to. I went to Bay Area last week for the Stanford Blockchain Week, and there was a lot of people building not very obvious use cases, not just okay, let's build a random app to send money from wallet to wallet, but they say, okay, we see the necessity in Philippines to off-ramp crypto to the local payment systems because it's a pain in the ass. So we basically want to solve just this use case, and we're very laser focused on this. Or I saw I met with a person who is building a very, very simple smartphone app where you can basically also do local on-ramp, local off-ramp, and do very, very simple transfers in USDT, USDC. That's pretty much it. So it's a very simple use case, but I think it's very, very compelling. By traveling to other countries such as Georgia, Turkey, Serbia, you can see that there are a lot of people who have crypto, they like it or not, and there are no good streamlined ways to, let's say, off-ramp from this crypto to local payment providers or local banks. So I think this is an amazing use case, and I'm very happy to see more people building in this space. I'm very fanatical about crypto cards. So I try to order any crypto cards that I see in the market, and I try to test them, how they work, what are the fees, because for me, that's the probably most compelling mainstream use case for crypto, and I really hope this will realize in the next year or so, because there are so many benefits for cross-border payments, batch payments. Basically, you can send 100 payments in one transaction. That's what blockchain enables you, which is never possible with something like Swift or any other traditional payment methods. But of course, there's so many things to be built on top so that it's compelling for the mainstream, such as on-ramp, off-ramp, which is convenient, which doesn't take 10% of your transaction, which is very inexpensive, and all this wiring and tooling around just sending stuff on the blockchain is very important. So I'm very excited about payments. But of course, yeah, we have social, we have a bit of gaming traction, we have a lot of trading still, and I think realistically in the current market, it's sort of number one use case. You know what I'm saying? People still trade. Institutions, they enter the market as well. So they're very interested in like trading or providing trading facilities to their customers. So I think that's still compelling use case. And the more stuff we have on the blockchain, the more things are happening, the more we have trading volumes, and so on and so forth. So I think that's basically already popular use case even in these markets, which are not very exciting. And I'm interested to see more boring use cases pop up, and more people actually start using blockchain, hopefully without even knowing they're using blockchain.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's interesting you say that you don't think Chainstack is a sexy company or this boring company, because I guess as soon as you use the word infrastructure, that's what people think, right? But actually, I do think what you guys do is very sexy and very cool, particularly in the space. I totally agree with your point on payments. It's almost the original use case, right? Yeah. That everybody came to, and it's still not been solved, which is kind of, I think every time there is a cycle, it gets set back, and then we kind of reset a little bit, right? Especially in the payment space. And but interested to see that even companies like MasterCard and Visa committed pretty seriously to the space, right? So I guess in terms of your customers or partners, what kind of like use cases are you working on? Who are you working with that you think is really interesting?
Yeah, I think largely we have three types of customers who we're working with. First is other pieces of infrastructure on chain, right? So we have amazing customers such as like Chainlink, Layer 0, and other protocol-based infrastructure projects that help to realize all these amazing use cases and Lego building blocks on the blockchains. Because you cannot just have just RPC for your node. You need to have other pieces of infrastructure that is running all together, and that enables you different things like the price feeds or bridging between different chains, which are very, very necessary. For DeFi, it's a must. So we cannot really do anything without some of these components. So first piece is basically other infrastructure projects which are building together with us to make the developer experience much more seamless, and so that there are more ready-to-use blocks in the space for people to build. The second group is very, very broad, is all sorts of builders. And we have a lot of different verticals there. We have a lot of interest from institutions, as I mentioned, because they are now exploring pretty seriously, trading use cases for themselves or for the customers. All sorts of course, DeFi projects, like 1inch, you name it, all the projects you can see on our website as well. If you can go, we have a lot of customer stories. We like to showcase our customers and show what they're building, so that other people can also get inspiration for their development and their products. Like we have a bunch of AAA games building on Avalanche subnets, and like on other chains like Solana and Polygon, ZKVM. So we have a lot of gaming which is using Chainstack as well, and really like it's a very, very horizontal product. So you don't have one vertical that stands out, because it's very, very broad need for it's like, okay, who is the major AWS customer segment? It's like everybody, like literally everybody who has a web app. They're using either AWS or GCP or like Azure or similar kind of platform. So it's very, very broad. What's unique about our business, I think, and our platform in general, is that we have third category, which is traders. I'll explain why. So basically, we originally I mentioned that our strategy was to build a multi-chain, multi-cloud API service. What it means is that basically we deployed our services everywhere. So in all sorts of different cloud providers. Now we have very sophisticated network of cloud providers, including what we call Chainstack Cloud, which is a bare metal based provider that we build ourselves from scratch. And we have around, I think, 12 regions as of today where you can basically deploy your APIs, which is a no-brainer for traders to choose, because let's say we have a big trading firm in Singapore that is trading on like 5 networks. Like, of course, they want to have the least latency possible for their operations. So why would they use something like, Infura, which provides, services in US for sending their transactions or getting, transactions from mempool, etc. So we kind of unlocked this use case organically. We didn't really like try to build for traders. because for us, it was always like the builders market is the primary one. We wanted to cater developers. That's what we are passionate about. Genuinely, that's what they have skin in the game as well. So they really understand like all the considerations of building an API business. So like talking to builders is our sweet spot for sure, and like working with them together. But traders was a big use case early on because of this like geographical diversity and also the features that we provided. For instance, you can have a private network connection between your, let's say, AWS account to your nodes that are running in Chainstack and get basically local network latency, which is the same thing as running the node yourself in your own like cloud. And it's amazing because people really enjoy this like, throughput that they get and like speed that they get for reads and writes on the blockchain. So it's been pretty interesting category for us. Of course, all these guys are quite volatile. So basically when the markets go up, we have big uptake of people who are like starting to trade immediately. When the market is down, it's getting a bit lower. For us, it's of course hurting sometimes, and especially in the early days. We have amazing customer, let's say it's like 10,000 MRR customer, and they suddenly like stop running everything, and they say, okay, they like cancel the subscription. And we come and say, okay, what's wrong? I mean, what can we fix for you? Like, let's work together. We have like a Telegram chat. And I say, guys, the platform is mind-blowing. It's amazing, but we just decided, to switch to some other strategies, like outside of crypto, because the markets are not so good. So it's very interesting category. I'd say it's there is a lot of, funding. There's a lot of money there. There's a lot on stake there. It's a very volatile industry, and we're trying to harness it because we really see the value for these people and like what kind of problem we're solving for them. So it's a big category for us on top of builders and other infrastructure players.
Yeah, I can totally understand why. And I mean, you mentioned themes there like, speed, throughput, uptime, and reliability, I guess. I would imagine that in the world of Web3, especially when we're talking about APIs, there are so many additional complications. What is it exactly that you guys kind of work on, I guess, in the API space that is particularly of interest?
Yeah, it's a great question because people, they tend to think about certain, business models as low-hanging fruits. I was actually the same. So when we started to build Chainstack, I was very naive because I was like, okay, so we are running our nodes ourselves currently. It's bad, but we can probably, if we build a service, we can make it better because we will just focus on that and not do all other things when we're building like a Web3 app. And then basically you start running it, and then you have absolutely, smooth operations when you have zero customers. It's like very smooth, nothing breaks. It's like you have no issues, nobody's calling you, nobody's like writing to you at support, etc. But things starting to get interesting when you actually start to have customers. And we were scaling together with like a bull market, like DeFi Summer, like Polygon launched, BSC launched. We were the first provider on both. And like the growth was just crazy. And we were like 15 people at that point of time. And we started suddenly to have like thousands of people willing to use our services. And that's basically when so that's how you build an infrastructure, product. That's when you start to care. And that's basically and what kind of problems you need to solve. So, and still people are very naive as of today, especially like new entrepreneurs. They say, like it's very easy to disrupt, infrastructure space. It's not complicated. You just run a node, like expose it to the internet and just sell requests, right? It's like pretty straightforward. But then there's like, that's just tip of the iceberg because the rest is like, okay, things break all the time. Like maybe Ethereum and Bitcoin are relatively stable today. They don't break like on a weekly basis. But all the like newest protocols, it's just crazy unstable because they're all trying to capture the market. I will not, name things, but like there's a big race now for all sorts of ZK EVM, and like people try to ship as fast as they can and try to go to market as quickly as they can, and basically they ship like very raw product that is very, very complicated to operate, which is in a good sense, positive for us because we basically abstract away our users from this complexity, from this instability. So our promise is that you will not need to care about, reliability, performance of your core Web3 infrastructure. So you can just rely on us. But of course, it's very, very complex problem to solve internally, because you don't just need to run stable software in a reliable fashion. You basically need to run very, very early stage software, which is, people call it beta. I think usually what they mean is alpha, but they cannot ship anything in alpha. So they say, okay, it's beta. So it's very, very raw and very, very complex to operate. So there's so many, things to care about. And I'm not even talking about, typical infrastructure challenges, because currently we are processing more than 2 billion requests per day. It's quite a lot of requests across all the networks we support. And basically you need to process, these thousands of requests per second in a way that doesn't break. So basically people will enjoy it. They will not have errors here and there. They have no timeouts here and there. And it's a problem per se with like high load services, which is quite notorious problem even in Web 2 space, where you basically need to offer like very high load services with people, of course, expect like 100% reliability, which is fair. I, as a consumer in this space, I also expect 100% reliability from our partners and vendors that we use. Of course, we understand the reality of it. So let's say that's why we also started with like multi-cloud approach, because we say, okay, any given, hosting provider cannot give us 100%. So we will need to distribute this infrastructure across different providers, different data centers, different regions, because that's basically the ultimate way to build it. And that's basically what we are, building on right now. Like the latest product that we shipped a few months ago is Global Elastic Node, which is basically geo-load balanced infrastructure. Very simple. It's like one endpoint. You use it for, let's say, Ethereum, and it routes, intelligently all your queries towards this node, that node. If this node breaks in this region, it reroutes to that node and that region. So it's all automatic. And it also gives you like the least latency for your location. So let's say if I'm talking to this endpoint from Singapore, it will always give me like Singapore node, which will be fast. Previously, we had a product called Regional Elastic Node, where you can actually choose the location explicitly, which again is still has some merit and a lot of value for certain customers like traders. But for majority, like developers, builders, infrastructure providers, it's very important to have, simple setup so that you don't need to like switch endpoints and all this kind of stuff. And that's basically what we shipped recently, which is getting a lot of popularity because people basically don't want to talk to you as an infrastructure provider, ideally. So they don't want to write to your support. They don't want to interact with you. They just want things to work all the time. Mm-hmm. And basically, like with 100%, success rate, no timeouts, no problems, like no downtimes. You always get the latest block. You always get the latest block in time, and so on and so forth. So that's what people expect, and it's very fair because we expect the same from our low-level, vendors that we use, just like hosting providers, clouds, bare metal, other tools, etc.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, customer experience is in everybody's interest, right? So yes. We have to get that right. One theme that we didn't touch upon, which I know is very close to your heart, is security. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So what are the specific challenges you see when it comes to security in the Web3 and DeFi space?
Of course. So I touched a bit upon on this when I said basically that the life cycle of an application in Web3 is radically different from Web2. So let's roll back to this idea, right? So what you have in Web3, let's say if you build a even simple, DeFi application, you deploy it, and then you want people to use it. When you deploy it, the first, second it's deployed, it's already being scanned by like, thousands of crawlers that are looking for new contracts, that are trying to like decompile a contract, try to find bugs immediately, and try to hack you like 24/7. And I'm sure there's a whole scene for that. And it's not even like there are like elite hackers that just, like manually try to hack all this like contracts. Of course there are, but I'm sure that there is like some gigantic infrastructure that is just basically scanning whatever is being deployed because money is on stake immediately. Of course, you might not have traction, or your project might die, or maybe you will have zero TVL. But if you don't have zero TVL, then you are immediately, it's like even before you thought about this, you're immediately under attack. So, which is a very big difference with like Web2 projects where you can, and where people postponed, security at later stages, we build an MVP, we're going to see if we have traction. And then if it's popular, we're going to hire a security person. and they will take care about all this like security shit.
And also, I guess where, money is not at the heart of everything in Web 2 quite often, right? There are different experiences deployed that can be anything. Whereas in Web 3, more often than not, there is a financial.
Yeah, because like DeFi has been, the primary use case of blockchains as of today, right? So my sort of controversial statement is that basically you're building a new DeFi app. You should hire a security person before you hire your first developer. And I mean that, like your first hire in the engineering team should be a security engineer. Why? Because you have so much at stake and you cannot really risk it. Because if you start building things, worst case scenario, you hire some like freelance developers and like they build some contracts for you. You don't even understand what's going on in the smart contracts. You start deploying it. It's like it's clear path to disaster. So my like controversial statement is that, guys, like before you, of course it's compelling and like all the lean startup, methodology tells us, okay, we should like ship as fast as we can. The code should be dirty. Like it should barely work, and like then only if you have traction, you should like ramp up and build it better and like stabilize it, etc. And this approach doesn't work at all in Web3. Because then people tend to ship all sorts of things. And of course, I mean, we don't need to provide examples, right? Yeah. So we have examples on all this sort of, scoreboards of like people getting hacked like every week, or like companies getting hacked or smart contracts getting hacked. So I think that's very important. And we should basically change the mindset of people building apps. Because now they still approach it, oh, that's just another app. It's just, we don't, deploy it to AWS, we deploy it to Ethereum. So what's the difference? And there's a big difference in this like approach. The second thought is that people always talk about audits, right? So the audit is like a pinnacle of security in Web3 space. They say, oh, you have like these audit stamps. The more audit stamps you have on the website, the better. And like if you have one, you're kind of so trustworthy. If you have three, it's pretty good. If you have five, like it's bulletproof, right? Basically, you have 5 stamps in the footer of your website, your security is amazing. The problem with audits is that they are point in time. And that's kind of the biggest problem of audits, not only in Web3 necessarily, but also in Web2, when you have like pen tests and all this kind of stuff, they're always point in time. So let's say you make a pen test and the report is ready by 1st September. Like on the 2nd September, you start shipping code. You start shipping updates. You change everything, you change setup here and there, you hire new people, you fire people, you forget to delete credentials, you forget to create credentials, you forget to configure things. And basically, like it becomes outdated the next day. So it's good reference for you to, oh yeah, I had these issues in the past, but it's absolutely not a way, for, consistent security approach. So unfortunately, in Web3 space, these audits are being taken as, okay, I finally have 3 audits. So now basically I'm secure, so my funds are safe. And unfortunately, it's misleading for users too, because they go on the websites, they see, oh, it's like 3 auditors stamped this website. It's amazing. I can use it without absolutely no, risks. So there is a big space, I believe, in like continuous security approach in Web3. We have a lot of tools like that in Web2, which basically are integrated in your, CI/CD pipelines, where you ship new version, it's getting scanned. When you make a change, it's getting scanned. I think the quality of auditing or like rather scanning tools in Web3 are pretty poor still. So we still need like better tools that are more actionable, and of course more people that know how to use these tools, because it's kind of unsexy thing. If you think about it, security was always unsexy thing. Let's say you have a security person in your company, and aren't you pissed off when they come and say, oh, you need to install this, like antivirus software on your PC. And you say, oh, why do I need it? It will just bloat my PC. It will make it run slower. It's like, so security is like, nobody likes security in general, right? So that's why this field is like so unsexy here as well, because like people, I would rather build a new, DeFi app rather than I build a security tool, or I because it's also kind of boring thing on one hand. And there's still a lot of money that are being put in the ecosystem, and say, plus minus like 10 mil here and there. It's just risks, it's fine. So basically there is this big space, I think big design space for like consistent, continuous security in the Web3 space. We are also looking into it because, again, I have a lot of, background in security. We have a lot of people in the team who are, very passionate about security. and they interested into solving this. So we are also looking into this, working with a lot of other folks in the space who are building amazing tools. Like one of our customers, for instance, Hypernative. It's a startup from Israel, and they're building proactive detection of exploits on chain. So they basically can tell you, okay, there are signs that this dApp will be exploited in like 2 hours, because there are some shady deployments happening here and there, including this, like contract addresses. So basically, like, okay, we know like 2 hours in advance that this might be exploited. Not necessarily gonna be exploited, but there are early signs, so you guys might have a look at it. Because usually when security firms are talking about this, these funds have been drained already, so you might have a look at it. Yeah, it's cool. Thank you for noticing us. It's very interesting information, but rather we should look at proactive stuff, right? Like, how do we prevent these hacks? How do we prevent them as early as possible? Of course, again, the complexity is very high, so it's very hard to predict every kind of hack and attack and so on and so forth. But I'm sure we are not nearly as good as, as 5% or 10% in potential for this space to be built. And there are a lot of references in like Web2 security tools that we can take on like consistent, continuous, security scanning and like prevention of attacks, because that's what's most important. Of course, it's interesting, to do a postmortem of an attack, or maybe, send on-chain messages to people to, return funds for the white hack bounty, whatnot. It's kind of interesting, cool, sexy, but, we need to work more on the proactiveness of this approach, and so that basically, people are hunting for bugs all the time, either internally or externally. Like one of the best security decisions we ever taken for our product is run a bug bounty, because basically you organically create this interest for people to hack you for a bounty. Like, what could be better? Because all of these people are like white hats, and if the bounty is reasonable for what you are building, let's say you build a DeFi app, giving a bounty of like $500 for critical vulnerability doesn't make any sense. Giving a bounty of like 100K, it's quite interesting, because people will actually start, trying your dApp and like trying to see whether you have, necessary protection, etc. And basically, you pay 100K and you had maybe 100 mil at risk. So it's a reasonable payoff, mm-hmm. Right? So this is another, good and very well-known approach for, continuous security, which is like bug bounty. I'm sure, like, again, whenever you go live on a mainnet, you should have bug bounty launched the same second, because then basically you not have only this like darknet, North China kind of infrastructures hunting for your money, but also like good people hunting for the bounties. So it's a very good approach. So I believe TLDR that the audits are important as pen tests are. It's important to have a snapshot of your, posture. It's good. We recently did a pen test. It was useful for us as a Web2, infrastructure company, because we are not touching smart contracts. We're just running, Web2. Literally, we're running Web2 infrastructure for the Web3 folks who are building on Web3. So it's very useful for us. We found a couple of interesting, problems in our systems. We fixed them. So it's a very reasonable thing to do, but you can never rely on that. And you should definitely not mislead, your users that this is like, okay, we have 3 audits, it's bulletproof. And that's unfortunately what we see, many projects in the space are doing. Okay, they put a stamp and they think that, okay, they are bulletproof.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. As a non-technical end user of a decentralized application, then audits are, according to you, kind of good. They show some diligence from the company. But if we want to reassure ourselves that an application is doing things the right way, what can we do to look out for that kind of like continuous transaction monitoring, continuous approach to security? Is it just looking out for communications from the company, or is there stuff that we can look for on chain to kind of
That's a great question.
Verify, right?
I thought about this recently when the Viper compiler was compromised, because it's a bit off track, but like people basically said, okay, blockchain is a trust machine. In reality, I think it's a wrong statement, because in the end, we have people who are building code on the blockchain, so we have to trust them. It's inevitable. The only way not to trust them is to read line by line everything that's being deployed on chain, which is not feasible. So I think blockchain is not a trust machine, it's rather like transparency machine, because you basically see visibility of all sorts of things happening on chain, mostly if people don't use mixers and all this kind of stuff, you still can figure it out. And companies like Chainalysis and others are very, very advanced in that. But in general, you see most of the things happening on chain, and sometimes it's very interesting to observe, because let's say after Curve was hacked, you could see what Michael was doing like every second. Basically, you could track his wallet easily. There are like amazing portfolio tracking tools now, and you could see what he's doing, like how he's selling his CRV to like Justin Tron, etc., etc. So it's very fascinating because it's super open. Can you imagine like this hack happened in like some bank, and then basically you can observe everything that the board of the bank is doing like in real time? It's impossible, right? It's impossible to track. But in Web3, in blockchains, it's possible because they're all transparency machines. So I think we slightly need to change also the perception about blockchains that they are trust machines, because in the end, yeah, you can trust Bitcoin. Highly likely, because it's been like OG of the chain, like more than 10 years in the making, never been hacked. Okay, we can assume that it's a trust machine. But what can you do with Bitcoin? Not much, right? So you can transfer funds, it's good, it's trustworthy, it's battle tested. But when we talk about the code, it's still written by people, so you have to trust these people. So this is an idea that came to my mind recently, that we should switch the perceptions of how we approach blockchains as systems. And then again, like in terms of what we should do for continuous security, ideally we should read every contract we interact with. Every person that interacts with a contract on chain should read and comprehend it, and basically at least try to understand what's going on there, which of course doesn't anyhow prevent hacks of this, because most of the hacks nowadays are pretty sophisticated already. So you cannot really understand whether this code is vulnerable or not by reading the code, but at least you can see some obvious patterns, like phishing and stuff, when you have some arbitrary controls over the smart contracts, all this kind of stuff, right? And there are amazing tools now for this. You have ChatGPT. You can go to ChatGPT and say, oh, ChatGPT, please explain me this contract. So it's kind of funny edge case, but in reality, it's not so funny, because if, let's say, you want to ape with like, 100K to some contract, it makes sense to spend an hour to kind of try to understand what the smart contract is doing, right? Not relying on, some Twitter post from the founder of this company, say, yeah, we did like 3 audits. Because how trustworthy is that? It's just a tweet, right? So the ultimate solution is, everybody should read the smart contract, right? If it's not possible. Hence, there are a lot of tools that help people to understand like the security posture. There are amazing tools that help you, show what this transaction will do, which is notorious in not being transparent, because wallets like MetaMask in the early days, they also focused on like, just core use case. And this is more of a like auxiliary feature. But now it's getting more and more, all these interactions are getting more and more sophisticated. So we need more tools that will actually help user to understand, okay, I click this button now, like what actually will happen? Am I giving like approval for all my ETH? Or actually, am I just, getting minted an NFT? Or like what exactly I'm doing, right? Because people are seeing this like hex code, and they see, oh, it's everywhere. It's like lightning. It's like, oh, mint now, expiring in 1 hour. So people, oh, you like FOMO, we need to mint. And nobody really thinks so. We need to have better tools, all right? And we see a lot of, tools being in the making for consumers as well, which is very important. But we're still, way to go until we have something that, we can rely on and say, okay, this is good enough. Even if these contracts are buggy and they are trying to compromise people, we have, reliable ways to, protect the end user. Because the end user is the ultimate, risk taker, right? So we need to help end users, right? So builders need to help end users from securing their own code as much as they can in a continuous fashion, and also like building tools that will help end user to understand what they're doing when they're interacting with the blockchains.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. For me, it's the ultimate conundrum, right? That it always comes back to do your own research. But then for most people, doing carrying out a level of research that is actually valuable is more or less impossible, right?
Yes.
That's kind of where we are right now. So like we say like, verify, don't trust, but often it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
Of course, you can look at things like Merkle trees, right? But I mean, you know what I mean? It's kind of, unless you're a highly experienced person or quite technical, it's you're always going to be putting your trust in somebody else at some point.
Exactly.
For most of the
So that's what confuses me about blockchains.
Yeah.
Is that we were like, okay, this thing is like a robust financial system, and it's kind of worse now.
Yeah.
Because you don't have anywhere to go if you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like you cannot call Vitalik really. I mean, you kind of can if you can find his number and such, but
yeah.
he will not roll back the chain now, likely.
No.
Like he did, like with the DAO, right? So,
Yeah.
so you have nobody to call. I mean, at least if you're fucked in the real world, you can call somebody.
Yeah.
You mean like police?
Yeah.
Like
some
try
kind of
calling
ombudsman.
police, say, oh, I've been scammed for this NFT drop on this website, and like somebody stole 0.3 ETH from me.
Yeah.
It's like good luck.
Yeah. Well, even for builders, right? I mean, I think that the path of the course is if you're hacked, you have to file a police report. And
Yeah.
I mean, most police forces probably aren't equipped to
Yeah.
handle something like this yet.
course.
Right? It's people need to catch up.
Yeah. And even in Web2, we see that this pops up all the time. It's like, I mean, the most notorious one would be probably like LastPass
Yeah.
compromise.
Yeah.
So basically, people like you have a password manager, and the whole promise of the password manager is to secure your passwords, and that's pretty much the only thing it should do, right? And then it doesn't deliver on this promise, and like okay, all my passwords are gone. It's like okay, it's not unique. It's not very unique to Web3. It's just Web3 is so complicated now for user that it's even harder to get to any level of security in a reasonable time. But also we can observe everything that's happening on the chain. We have a chance to see like what is actually going on by reading a code, by looking at the previous transactions and so on. But the attackers are so sophisticated that basically even for advanced users, I think it's pretty hard, and you have to be literally paranoid to have zero exposure. I think you have to be paranoid today. It's impossible to have zero exposure if you're not paranoid. Bottom line. So I think that what is important is to have this like levels of abstractions eventually on top of chains that will give people the necessary assurance. What could it be? For instance, I think that it's quite smart to provide users insurance or options to buy insurance, right? Because basically if they use bank, their money are insured by default, correct? Like by some governmental organizations, etc. So when they are on chain, the funds are not insured by default because again, you cannot call Vitalik and claim your policy. So you have to do it yourself, or you have to basically use something that gives you this out of the box, which brings us back to this idea that blockchain is just a machine to basically record transactions, and it's not necessarily trustworthy, but it's a very good way to record transactions. It's very reliable. It's a very secure way of recording transactions because they're immutable, etc. But all the auxiliary tools that will bring, crypto rails to mass adoption are yet to be built, and they are again pretty boring. Like you have to package insurance in your product, and maybe don't even sell it to the user separately, because that's now what DeFi products are doing. They say, oh, so we are audited by these 5 firms, but also if you're not sure, you can buy like Insure A's plan for this particular dApp or any other like insurance provider. And this is a good start, but then as a user, you have to figure out, okay, which plan do I need for this dApp? Which plan do I need for that dApp? And I can have coverage for all dApps for unlimited, cap, etc. You need to, DYOR on insurance. Like, do you really DIOR on insurance when you're banking now? Not really, right? You're just like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to DBS office and I'm just, putting funds and I'm withdrawing funds and it all works. I do like, pay now transfers. Yeah, somebody stole, my credit card. I can go and like roll back the transaction. So I think that we are still yet to build this, this auxiliary tools, which are again very boring for people in this space to build, which is a bit unfortunate because I've been on a few events over the last 3 months, and people hate building boring things here because there's so many, exciting stuff to build. You can build a new Oracle. You can launch a new chain. It will be like parallelized EVM. So amazing, so cool. And I, as a technologist, I really understand that. But then, okay, guys, we build all these pieces of infrastructure, and who's going to be using it? Currently, we are the only users, again. So all this boring stuff, all this wiring, how do we basically make sure the users are safe and they actually trust this, things that are built on top of blockchain, crypto, etc. That's a big question still. And again, there are some movements into this direction, selling insurance on your dApp interface. It's good, but I think it's still far from whatever people expect. Yeah, you want everything in one package. You want some service. And that's why I think it's kind of, ridiculous to say, banks are dead. Banks are not providing the payment rails. Payment trails are provided by, Swift or other, rail providers. Banks are providing you the service so that you can sleep at night and don't worry that in the morning you will wake up and all your funds are gone. That's basically what they do. They don't offer you the, some sophisticated, payment system that will be robust and fast, etc. They provide you the service. So can banks work on crypto? They can definitely do that. Would it be good? Probably yes, because these rails are arguably more efficient than Swift, for instance. Should they do that? Depends on whether they can benefit from doing that, right? Because again, for users, the value proposition is usually so simple. Because we tend to, as a technologist, we tend to think about value proposition in a very nuanced format. So it's we need decentralized games. Or one of my favorite examples from recent weeks is that basically all this narrative about gaming is that, you are in Steam universe and you have a helmet in some Steam game, but you cannot sell it outside of Steam, right? So if this helmet is on the blockchain, you can just go and trade it anywhere. So cool. You can move it from Steam to some other universe, or you can sell it on OpenSea. And then the interesting point is that you talk to gamers and say, we don't give a damn about this.
Why would I do that?
We don't care. It's we love Steam. Steam is the best platform.
Yeah.
It's so cool. We have so many games. It's so interoperable within the ecosystem. So they don't care about this we can take this helmet from Steam elsewhere, right? So users are very straightforward people. They need simplicity. They need ease of use. They need low cost. They need high speed. They don't think about this in, is this game decentralized enough? Or is this or is this app providing me, self-custodial options for my funds? It's like a dream that everybody will be, taking care of their custody. We have a team internally which is doing finance. And we have some operations on the blockchain. And they couldn't care less about installing a new wallet to sign transactions or something like that. They're very happy with banks and the interfaces they provide today as users. And they don't really want to mess up with all this scary, unclear area where you go and you can mess up immediately and because you don't understand it. And they need to reconcile transactions using Etherscan. It took us 6 months to get to the level where I can basically explain, okay, here's what's on the transaction page of Etherscan. Here's what's happening. Because people don't want to care about this, right? So I think that we need to build this ultimately if we want mainstream adoption, because maybe we don't. It's another question, right? So if we do want mainstream adoption, we need to start building these boring middlewares and layers of abstraction and packaging of all amazing stuff that is happening on the core layer and present it to the end user without mentioning blockchain, unfortunately for us, because we like mentioning blockchain so much.
Yeah.
So it's a new type of app. It's now not just game, it's a crypto game. So cool. Sounds so cool. It's it's not just a website, it's website built on TCP/IP. Amazing. Wow, so cool. Sounds amazing. Right?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think you said it right at the beginning of the conversation that we need to, that for mainstream adoption to happen, people almost don't need to not make the realization that they're interacting with the blockchain, right? It just needs to feel like any other website or application without that the blockchain complication. Eugene, I really enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think before you bid goodbye to everybody, it would be great if you could share a little bit more about where people can learn about you and maybe connect with you online, and also learn a little bit more about Chainstack.
Of course. Thanks again for an amazing conversation in sunny Singapore. I can be found anywhere in Singapore, honestly, on hawker centers, in the office, on the events. So please reach out to me in Twitter, in Telegram. I'm very, very responsive. So I will be happy to talk to fellow builders. Chainstack is happy to host you for any needs that you have for your projects. We have tools from RPC nodes up to subgraphs, up to facets, and anything that you really need to build an amazing user experience, an amazing application in Web3 across all the protocols that you can think about. Currently, we support more than 25 and adding more. So you have absolute flexibility in what you want to use and how you want to build it, and very complete suite of services and tools to build your Web3 application today.
Amazing. Thanks so much. If, like me, you learned a whole lot today, then please do subscribe to our show. Don't forget to like and share it with your friends. The more likes, the more shares, the better guests we'll be able to get onto the show. Thank you.